Glenn Wheaton, my remote viewing mentor, who taught me much of this stuff, and I appreciate it, Glenn. First of all, I hope you don't mind. I was kind of quoting you from a private conversation where it was in Kaneohe about 20 years ago, where you were giving a lecture on how remote viewing works. And I asked you flat out, I said, did Special Forces Intel use remote viewing? Yes. Um,
Okay.
would you
No harm
use
done.
it if would you use it? You wouldn't use it if it didn't work. And you said, yeah, that's right. And I said, you wouldn't use it if you didn't kind of understand how it works. So did you guys understand how it worked? And you said your words were pretty much.
Uh, yeah, but I would caveat it today. Like, let's say you find an unknown type of bomb. You don't know what the contents of the bomb are, but you know that if you push the lever and pull the trigger out and throw it, it'll blow up. Even though I don't, if I've got experience with it, then yeah, I'll use something that I don't know how it works.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, I think there's a lot of cases like that in especially the military where you're using some type of device or something, some system that, you have to have a technician for. Sylvania guy got to get
Yeah.
called in when something isn't working. But um,
Uh,
during
Also,
those days,
yeah, I want to make another thing clear before we get started. Is that we're not uh, disrespecting Skip Atwater, because Skip Atwater is our friend and he's done, a major
act-
force in remote viewing and a good buddy of
actually,
ours.
probably this month, one of the Sundays this month, I'm going to have Skip Atwater as a guest at Enigma.
Well, he came and stayed at your house and we had a great time with him. We went to his book signing. He came to Hawaii Remote Viewers and gave us a lecture, and we love Skip is a great guy. He's a really nice guy, real
He
smart,
is.
one of the pioneers of remote viewing. So, tip of the hat to Skip Atwater. We never would disrespect him.
When I watched the Sean Ryan interview, Skip told so much that if you weren't in this business, not the military remote viewing side, but if you weren't in this business, you wouldn't be able to put it all together, piece all
In
the
what business?
components.
In military intel business or?
No, the remote viewing, just
Oh,
what
okay,
we've,
remote. Yeah,
I mean, you've been doing this 25, half a quarter of a century. You've been doing it
yeah.
25, 26 years. So uh, now you figure the military guys, they were probably in their little slots for 3 to 7 years or 10 years. So you already got more than double that experience actually functioning on a daily basis in the field. So what could they possibly know that uh, you don't know? Well, there's a lot that the higher ups knew that the individual viewer didn't know because viewers produce, and the guys behind the controls picking the targets and they would pick a target that might not be of any value to them right then, but might be in 6 months because there's some projection made from some other platform. So yeah, but Skip gave so much information. For if you've been in the community for this long, it'll pull together people, places, and targets that you didn't know anything about, or and how the system actually worked. How Skip got from being a staff sergeant to a lieutenant to actually a second lieutenant to a first lieutenant to a captain, uh, got derouted from the Pentagon up to Fort Meade. And what does that mean? It means when that happens, um, and I don't think I'm wrong, uh, Department of the Army ceases to be your boss, and your boss becomes the director of the National Security Agency, your ultimate boss, because of the type of activities that remote viewing is and the Geneva Convention. Um, Only certain people can do it.
Why
So
the Geneva Convention? That human use or
spying.
Oh,
who could
spying.
legally spy? Yeah, who could
Oh, who
legally
can
spy?
legally spy?
Yeah. So if you were just, and we've got what was it back then? Back in the day, Waimea, wiretapping, intrusion, meakening, something, and then jamming. So you couldn't do those types of activity like a grunt, 11 Bravo out of the division couldn't be used as a remote viewer unless he was transferred into an organization and was slotted in one of those job titles that were uh, legally authorized to conduct an intelligence operation or surveillance, regardless of the type, whether it's satellite, human, SIGINT, any of those ints. But when all the things that Skip exposed, you can actually use that to recreate the remote viewing origins inside the Army, and forget about SRI. Like so much of if you look at all the declassified documents, almost none of it comes from Department of the Army. It's usually coming from some headquarters here to SRI, CIA, SRI, different points within the government, some within the Pentagon. But as far as what Fort Meade actually did with the skill, um, none of that was declassified that I could see. You might see some session highlighted, like Lynn Buchanan or Paul Smith predicting a missile strike on a ship at sea or
Yeah.
something like that. But for the normal day-to-day operations and all the communications that have to happen in there, none of those communications are in any of that package.
So the CRV manual was declassified and is published online. The method that you taught us that you guys had developed, which we now call the Hawaii Remote Viewers Guild protocols, that is not classified. But what you all did with it, you never talked
Right.
about that. I've never heard you.
Because there'll be successes and failures. And then again, there's a couple rules, especially in SF. Never compromise the people you're with at any level. Just never compromise other people unless they're sitting right next to you and they're part of,
Mhm.
you know, the disclosure. The other rule is, and SF's famous for it. ASA is famous for it. They're considered to be like silent soldiers. They'd never tell. If they do tell, then it's wrapped in something and metaphored into an enigma somehow, so that they can get compliance with who they're dealing with, but they never tell. So, and that's okay. Well, so you got in the Army, you had INSCOM. INSCOM was the combination of the Military Intelligence Service with the Army Security Agency, primarily because of consolidation of budgets. The ASA, even though we had maybe, I don't know, 20, 30,000 less soldiers in the ASA than in the Military Intelligence Service, our budget was 10 times their budget because of the different things that we would do or we needed to do in different places. Skip told a story that you can see what the outer eggshell of the remote viewing is. You get the whites of the egg have been declassified. The egg's cracked. Colonel Shannon said that they crack the egg, and that's how you make an omelet. The whites have been declassified, but the yolk still hasn't been declassified because there's General Thompson, different people, Stubblebine, who, well, let me not throwing him under the bus. But let me throw Admiral. Oh, you're quiet. You're silenced.
Sorry, I put a post up on Facebook where I said, civilians, you're never going to know the history of military remote viewing. You're just not ever going to know it. It's not going to be told to you. And
Well, they
I
don't want to
said,
take the heat for the F ups when you screw something up, or a lot of shit doesn't work right off the bat. So that's the sole reason careers
But
are at risk.
but I did mention Bobby Ray Inman, Admiral
Yeah.
Bobby
Well,
Ray Inman, as being
Admiral Inman was an adamant supporter.
of much more than just the Star. Well, has he been publicly associated with Stargate?
Uh,
In the history of Stargate as published, was Inman in that chain of command, or was,
well,
I
during
mean,
those years,
Stargate goes more to General Stubblebine. But the point I'm making is Inman was
yeah, but
Navy admiral, so the Navy had their own program, is what we could
well,
assume.
the director of the National Security Agency is always an active duty general or admiral coming from any branch of service. I mean, you could get a Coast Guard admiral that would actually be appointed to become the new Dernza. But um, because these are officers you're talking about, um, they're not going to let their careers crash and burn over some failed objective. But because they're soldiers and sailors, they're still going to try. So they're always going to try, but they have to have some type of cover. Um, so when they declassified it, it was simply because the climate of the time, nobody wanted to have to deal with it because it was so much explaining. I was talking to Bill Ray today, and I told him, I said, you guys are, since for 26 years, you've been dying death by 1,000 paper cuts. Everybody is going to jump on you for any word, any name, any association, whatever, with the program. And they might be enthusiastic about the activity itself, but still, they're gonna they need content. They're gonna want to know absolutely everything. And of course, well, you never see any message traffic in about how many times Buchanan was late for work, or when so and so declined to work a particular target or what. You're never gonna get see that kind of stuff. That's the normal content of most of the military associated traffic in a unit. The unit reports, those types of things. They never showed you any of that. Unit budgets, where the money was spent. They're not going to show you that. They're not. And and then there's this caveat. Whenever you deal with the National Security Agency, um, Stearns is your boss. They always got this caveat of the ability to exempt certain information from general declassification. So even though it's supposed to be declassified, um, command can just say, well, that's exempt under this statute in the USIDS. It's exempt from general declassification. So CIA can't declassify anything the Army did that was classified. Period. And that's where you get the Stargate documents from CIA. Yeah, but
Yeah, from the CIA. So, but what the Army was doing, if the Army doesn't want you to know, you don't know.
correct. And so much is lost by that, but big whoop. What are you going to do? Just because you don't know every detail, you'll hear stuff where, Ed Dames will say, well, Lynn Buchanan is the guy that cleaned the latrines because he was enlisted. He's an enlisted man. So, yeah. So there's all
There's a
that.
guy, John Herlosky, I think is his name, who quoted on Facebook said, well, Glenn Wheaton, Joni Durf confirmed that Glenn trained with Ed Dames. Saying it's
Thing.
that old
I,
trying to
I
say
might
that
have met him in Morse
you're
code school when we were
what was
both
that?
learning Morse code. Ed Dames is a Morse code operator, same as me. That's his
Yeah.
start.
No,
You
I
know,
think the insinuation was that you learned TRV from Ed Dames and then tried to make it become I'm a remote
yeah.
viewer and make my own form
You
of
and
remote.
at that time, you and I were looking for some place to hang out and just talk about remote viewing with different people.
Yeah, we went on their chat
So
site.
that's the only place we ever went.
We
But
bought
I did.
their tape to see what they were doing.
Yep. I also worked a lot of targets for Jonina Durov.
Did you really?
I did.
Oh,
Yeah.
targets of a private nature, I would assume. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
We don't
And
need to
then,
go down.
well, one was she had put in the chat, she had put up there's something on my refrigerator. Can any of you guys tell me what it is? And I told her that it was a paper plate clock with arms that was made by her daughter. And then that caught her attention. Then she emailed me back and said, "What else is on my refrigerator?" So and it went on from there. We built a relationship. I mean, you met her at Vegas when we went to Las
Yeah,
Vegas in
yeah.
'99. Oh no, that was well, we went to Vegas, but it was
That was the first conference we went to. That was
yeah,
early at late
Sea
90s.
Red's Oasis. It was at Sea Red's Oasis,
Yeah,
about 20, 30 miles north of Vegas.
yeah.
Um, yeah, the availability of information is like really slim. Everybody knows who uh, Bill Ray is and Dale Graff, uh, geez, Watts, uh, different
Mel
people that
Riley.
Mel Riley, General Thompson, uh, but they just know it like it was like an introduction. But what Skip does is he paints a picture of of how it grew, how the concept and idea grew when he tells the story about finding the documents in the safe and then going across the hall to see his boss and then getting redirected so and so, how he became an integral part of the origin of an actual army operation to utilize uh, remote viewing. And they had to do it in a roundabout way because they had to have a contractor, they had to have everything. And this is one thing I'll tell you about Skip that you get. Skip wouldn't cheat or lie about anything
Mhm.
in regards to that. And he wouldn't like even interviewing the viewers, working the targets, he wouldn't allow them to deviate from the protocol because then he's not doing his job. He would tell them shut up a lot of times. So um, when he came to Hawaii, it was during the same time period that, and I want to show you if you can share a screen. I want to show you an image. If you remember this image.
Yep.
So in this lecture, we were talking about time. Why don't you look at this guy over here in this cube over here with different locations. Do you remember what that was all about? Or have you forgotten? It's been a long time ago.
I forget exactly. I mean, I remember I took that picture. I remember taking it, and I remember that's where I asked you, so did you guys understand how remote viewing worked? I could probably let me see, was you're gonna have
Well,
to
think on
refresh me.
think on it. Let me stop this share and start another share where Skip is going to tell a little story. Share.
Was that the story of Pat Price remote viewing the swimming pool that used to be a sewage plant?
No, this is a different little story.
Oh,
You
okay.
probably
This is
didn't
toward the
pay
end.
attention.
Okay.
It's hard to talk about dimensions, but I was standing behind an alien in a spacecraft, just a small one, which I understand get bigger and smaller depending upon. At any rate, he said, "You shouldn't be here." And I said, "I know, I realize this is a strange place, but before I go, could I ask you a question?" And this is really a very strong memory in my head. Excuse me, in my head. I don't remember what I had for dinner last night, but this is in there. I'm telling myself I'm silly again. Dude, it's not in there. At any rate, and he said, okay. And I said, how do you get from here to Alpha Centauri? We can't do that. The only thing that we think about is I have to go really fast for a really long time. How is it that you can go to Alpha Centauri without any problem? And essentially he said, you wouldn't understand. So I said, I agree that that's a problem. However, I know that you have access to my mental thoughts. I mean, you're not talking to me with your mouth. You have access to my mental thoughts, and I understand that. Can you use what information I have in my head and try to explain it to me? And he said, well, do you know what a Rubik's Cube is? And I said, oh yeah, my son can do them in 2 minutes. He says, okay, so imagine a Rubik's Cube, but not necessarily just the 6 sides. Just imagine the concept of a Rubik's Cube. And I said, okay. Now imagine on each one of the tiles on the Rubik's Cube has a chart of the elements, an elemental chart. And you say, oh yeah, I know what that is. You know, I've had science in school and everything. He says, now, on each of the other 5 surfaces, there's also elemental charts. And I said, so, okay, but what's the deal? And he said, well, you're thinking about going that way very fast for a very long time. What he didn't say to me, which I'm thinking right now, there's no space and time. I'm only thinking that right now. That wasn't part of the explanation.
Hello guys, so I just wanted to come in here and talk to you guys about better help. I know therapy can be such a taboo subject.
Got a commercial.
And he says, so what you do to get to Alpha Centauri is you just twist the cube. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I told you you wouldn't understand. And he said, when the periodic table occurs in a different place, you're at that place. And that's just a very crude explanation. But you have to stop thinking about go that way for a long time very fast. It doesn't work. And so, you know, the Rubik's Cube and all that nonsense is probably just trying to mess with my mind and everything. And because that doesn't make, how many Rubik's Cubes do you have to have? You know, it's a stupid question. It's just an explanation for me to try to get my thinking straight, because he was very strong when he said.
So it has to be utilizing some type of a consciousness, correct?
I think that that's absolutely true. It's a consciousness act.
And so you're talking about quantum, what was it? Quantum locale, correct?
Yeah.
And so there has to be some kind of a connection. If you heard of, what is, they call it, man, now I'm having problems.
Let me go back to
What I took from that, because I hadn't listened to that before. Okay.
well, you got the Rubik's Cube lecture over 20
That's
years ago.
20 years ago.
At least. I don't remember, what was I doing in Paris in 1939? But anyway, just if you remember that, this is a place where everything's all together, the past, the future, and the present, it's all together right here. And your mind's just like a sewing machine, dipping in, dipping out, dipping in, dipping out. And these are an example of that idea of the Rubik's Cube, where you can just select someplace by your intention alone, and boom, you're there. The thing is too many people that make slight remote viewing contact aren't getting the bandwidth of data coming back from the target, because they don't displace enough of their awareness to the target to establish the ability to collect their own information about where they're sitting in their chair, what the temperature is, if they're hungry or not. So you got all that type of data that's noise in your own system, and then you're trying to bring back this faint signal, and it's faint unless you can focus more, like you said in the car wreck mentality, where something gets 100% of your attention. So what's the best skill to have in this business? And that's your ability to focus on something that's singular.
Okay, what I took from the Rubik's Cube and the periodic table was not so much consciousness as emulation. That if you have elements in the periodic table that are resonating one place and the other place, it's quantum entanglement.
Right. I got that. Multiple personality disorder. What if that was on demand? That let's say you're looking at something, and instead of being all here, what you're looking at, if a tree across the stream, across, dogs walking, people walking, and you wanted to sit underneath that tree, you could do it. You could displace enough of your awareness that you would get a sense of that by the simple act of focus and displacement. And displacement is another word for intentionally vectoring to some attractor.
There was a post on Facebook today where somebody took remember Cert's breath mints from 30 years
I
ago?
do.
And they said in the post, like, there was a time when every woman had Cert's breath mints in their purse, that they could produce one on demand within 15 seconds. And
Okay.
it took me, I was with my mother in that instant where I thought of that, because my mother's purse smelled of Cert's. That was the smell of her purse. And it was, that memory took me back to being with my mom just for that 1.5 seconds. So, yeah. What did you think of Skip's explanation of time and space? I mean, you got to say more than just, well, it's every now, everything is now and everywhere is here. Do you buy my explanation that our consciousness is a part of the overall like the God consciousness, and they take a bit of that, somehow marry it to human body and let us focus our awareness in the here and now? Like, maybe we're not supposed to remote view. Maybe we're supposed to
Maybe you are. Let's say EMP occurs over Honolulu. Computers drop, power systems drop. Does it affect your thinking in any way? It doesn't. You could fire off an EMP, and if your eyes are open, you might get some overview from the flash of the EMP going off, but it's not going to affect your ability to think. So consciousness wouldn't be affected by that. So if you want a remote viewing in Nagasaki or Hiroshima, you wouldn't not run away. Because you can still think, you can still animate your body. So there's something about the brain, the cranium, the density. It's probably the number one thing that stops telepathy, is because the human brain is
so thick.
protected and electromagnetically dense. So yeah, I think that Skip's concepts about how we're, well, like you said, consciousness observing, we have a bandwidth of observation. So, can you remember something that happened yesterday along with something that happened today? The same thing at the same, or temporally the same time? That's when I gave a couple of lectures on thinking globally. A lot of people have never thought globally in their life. Let's say you're in a squad of 6 men in a line down a trail, and somebody hollers contact left, and that means you're going to be attacked from the left. And then you got to instantly, whoever the leader is, he's got to figure out, well, he'll set himself, the guys will reline up behind him, and then they'll start to exit the ambush zone. And he knows the direction that he's firing in. He can feel the weight of his weapon changing because of weighty lead leaving. He knows when he's getting close. He can actually count the number of rounds he's firing. At the same time, be aware the number of rounds people behind him are firing, because he's going to have to reload. So, and when he hollers reload, the guy behind him knows that he needs to have a full magazine. So he should have reloaded before the lead guy runs out of ammo, because as he's running back to reset again in a line, he's going to reload. So they can just stair step behind each other and exit the kill zone of the ambush as safely as possible. So thinking like that is different from just shooting and then you become aware that you're out of ammo. Your hammer no longer slams forward. But when you can,
you're a moving piece in a big puzzle.
right, and you got a lot of internal parts, and all of them are movable. So if you're not counting rounds, in the meantime you're aiming, you're listening, you're keeping track of your guys, because everybody will be doing something, and then when you go reloading, that's when you're going to dip, turn around, and run back in the direction that you're going to go. So the thing is most people don't think globally. So global thinking would be the one thing that you could do when you're remote viewing a target and you get an image, by focusing on it, recalling it, focusing again on the recalled image, focusing again, by continuing to refocus. It narrows your focus down so that you might collect more information from something you remember than something you actually saw. Kind of unique. It works in remote viewing really well. The Nemo icon, the recall, visual recall should be like the most hammered radial on the Nemo icon, because you really got to use it to remember what you see something, and then use that.
My most used radial on Nemo is kinesthetic. That's where I get most of my data and have the most fun. For me, I still, Glenn, have not mastered replay. I get a visual, I record it. I guess I can go back to it, but not so much on demand. But I can work the kinesthetic all day long.
Kinesthetic's more of a story. Observate, like humans are poor observers, really. They are. I mean, we walk around all day, we're going this way. We seldom look down. We almost never look up. And it would be really strange to stop and turn around to look where we came from. A lot of little kids get lost coming home from school, not going to school. It's because they never turn around to look like what the direction home looks like. And so it becomes like a rally memory in them. They don't recognize what the drugstore sign looks like from the other direction, but they know that if they keep going straight down the road, turn at the theater, the school's going to be right down the street on the left. So it's just patterns that we have, because we no longer have to look everywhere all the time.
What's your concept of Was I correct in saying that the universe is comprised mostly electromagnetic wave frequencies coalescing and interacting?
It's
Is
an
that-
electric unit. It's an electric universe,
Yeah.
literally. So when people say, well, I saw the part on the Faraday cage, it's like that was like the cheapest gimmick I've ever seen in that one BBC uh thing on extrasensory perception where Targ's in the Faraday cage. The the opening on the cage, the spacing of the screen on the cage was so big, hell, every AM radio station would get in there. So you get all this noise. That's going back to Spottiswood's 1330 local sidereal time, when the 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 Earth almost in its entirety is between you and the center of the galaxy where all the celestial noise comes from. So we know that noise is electromagnetic. We can look at the noise floor on spectrum analyzers, and we can see that as night falls, the noise floor drops, which means signals that don't really have maximum illumination in the brain waves of your head, they can become more illuminated and more useful in your thinking process. So EMF, electromagnetic force, is all we do. If you look at your brain, it's an electric battery, literally. It's biochemicals, electromagnetics, and we can, how do they fix it? A lot of times the solution to fix something wrong in your brain is to put some lithium in there, increase the amount of lithium or decrease the amount of something else. And that allows, the synaptic pathways to function properly, normally. So how can it not be EMF? They like to use the square inverse law. Like, that's why you can't remote view Pluto, because it would take too long for the signal for an EMF signal to get there, come back. There's no way you would have any type of coherent transfer of information. It's not the case when, you just point yourself, you vector yourself by your intention, and then you kind of activate that part of your brain where you're looking, you're sensing, you're using all your senses to detect something. And that's how the remote viewing process starts. You start collecting from this intended, square on your Rubik's cube.
Yeah, you're turning the Rubik's Cube with your duplicity of awareness, so it lines
Right.
up, and the blue cube is next to the blue cube. Then you've got the information from the blue cube.
Right. And instead of there being a periodic table on the tabs, there's a target ID on the tabs.
Yeah.
So you could literally, I could work you all day on different targets, maybe 10 or so, and then it would be a lot easier for me on the next day to send you back to any one of those by just selecting one.
How does Skip discussed Pat Price being given somebody's farmhouse that wasn't too interesting, but over here was the secret base, so he was drawn to that.
Right. Sugar
In Future
Grove.
Forecasting Group, we call it a luminosity target. How in your mind does that work when like when we saw 9/11, we were working a validation target, and we perfectly described the 9/11 event a few hours before it happened. Is it just that is flaring up more brightly in consciousness?